Hey everybody, it's Charles from HumbleMechanic.com. Today taking your questions on power steering fluid, fuel system issues, oil leaks, and more. This is episode 233 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. Remember, if you want a question on a show like this, to email me, charles@HumbleMechanic.com. Put question for Charles in the subject, then ask your question right at the top. Give me some space and give me all the details of your question. That helps out a ton when reading the questions for this show and for answering them. Also, if you don't see your question on a show like this, be sure to check out the Quick Videos playlist on YouTube, where I do one question per video. And if you would prefer to just listen, there is audio-only versions of this and many other shows on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, your favorite podcasting platform, or of course at HumbleMechanic.com. All right, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, and even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. And real quick, if you want exclusive content, discounts to places like USP Motorsports, Black Forest, Kerma TDI, Prime Shades, MyMechanic, Adams Polishes, and more, check out that crew membership program. Great way to score some banging discounts as well as help support the show. As always, there are links down in the description. All right, with that all wrapped up, let's get into the questions. First one up from Rich. Any videos on should power steering fluid be flushed? Rich, good question. I actually don't have any videos on power steering fluid being flushed. For the most part, if I've ever needed to service that, it's been kind of a drain and fill type deal. We did, for a while, have at the dealership a power steering fluid flush machine. And VW, Audi, they don't have any service interval for any of the power steering fluid systems. As far as I know anyway, I've never seen one. And what we were doing is we were finding like really dirty fluid and replacing it with good clean fluid, which I do think is a good practice to do. I think that machine that we had, though, was more of a wallet flush than a power steering flush. It would pull power steering fluid from about this height and pump power steering fluid on a little hose. The two of them were attached together from a little bit higher. So it was pulling up from this one and pumping from this one. And to me, it felt like it was probably just pumping up good clean fluid mixed with dirty fluid, but you really weren't doing anything to fully experience a good power steering fluid service. Most of the ones that I've done on my own cars have been due to repair, power steering rack, or a broken line, or like on the Mark III, because we had everything apart, all the fluid got drained out of everything, basically. So it was a complete rehab of all the fluids, including power steering fluid. You can just do a drain and fill. You can do like 2 drain and fills. That usually works pretty well to get any built-on crud out of there. Beyond that, I don't really think the machines that a shop may have would do all that much, especially if it's all done through the reservoir. Again, the one that we had was it was a joke, and nobody ever really used it because nobody felt like it did all that much for our customers. So if you're gonna do it, I think it's a great idea. I think getting good, clean fluid in there is definitely something that I would consider. Eventually, we'll be doing it on the R32. That'll come along with some power steering hose replacements, most likely. So it'll kind of be that repair maintenance all piled into one. But you can just do a drain and fill. That works pretty well. A good way to get some of the fluid out is to take one of the lines off and just rotate the wheel back and forth with the car off. This will push most of the fluid out. Just do it slow. You don't need to do it really, really fast. That'll whip the fluid. Then put everything back together, fill it up, bleed the power steering fluid system. I always did it with the car off, wheels up, rotate the wheel a couple of times, start the car, let the pump start pumping, and then rotate the wheel very slowly back and forth until I got all the air out. The key for me was doing with the car off the ground, so it was less stress on the system and it wasn't having to work so hard to move the wheels back and forth. So Rich, good question, and I hope that helps. All right, next one up is from Matthew. I have an FSI GTI with a low rail pressure code and no power. My mechanic is telling me the camshaft is worn and has to be replaced, but I would like a second opinion. For the details, this is a 2007 GTI with 86K Stage 2 tune I brought to a local VW Audi specialist shop for a carbon cleaning and oil change. After the work was done, the car developed low fuel rail pressure and multiple random misfires. Beforehand, the car drove perfectly fine without any codes. I've replaced the cam follower twice since I've owned the car. Both times the follower looked great and the cam lobe had no gouges. Shop order to use, high pressure fuel pump, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's not that Matthew distrusts the tech, just looking for second opinion. So you guys saw the picture. I'll throw it back up so we can check it out together. To me, it's really hard to see 100% from this angle. So what's been done is the vacuum pump's been removed, and you can get a pretty good visual on what that cam looks like. For the most part, we can see here the follower looks pretty good as well. I wouldn't be jumping to conclusions on this is a worn camshaft just yet. If you really properly wanted to do all the work to test that camshaft, what you can do is you can set up a dial indicator and see what the actual lift of the camshaft is, right? How much is it going to be pushing the high pressure fuel pump open? The difference in height between the top of the lobe and the flat portion of that lobe there on the camshaft. You could do that, and I think that would be the most accurate way. It's a lot of work, and I've never had to do that to diagnose one of these. So the key here to me is the car was fine, and now it's not after a repair. And a repair that worked somewhere in that system. What I would really want to make sure is that everything is plugged in all the way, right? That pressure sensor on the rail is plugged in, the one on the high pressure pump is plugged in, the solenoid for the pump is plugged in, and I would want to make sure that the fuel lines are correct. This code can be caused by a pinched line, a bent line. That metal line is easy to manipulate. Maybe it got bent or something, or kinked when they were taking the intake manifold off. I have no idea if that happened or not. These are just some assumptions that we have to look at. I would first, before I put any more parts on this car or $1 more into it, I'd go back and double check the workmanship and make sure that the lines aren't bent, there's no issues with fittings, that the fuel pressure sensors are good. Check the part number on the one attached to the high pressure pump. It should be a K revision. If the part number doesn't end in K, then you might want to look at replacing that. Those are really cheap and super easy to install. So that's a quick, easy thing to just throw on. We also want to look at things like fuel filter. We want to make sure the fuel pump's not bad. The fuel pump control module, those are all common-ish things to have failing. The fuel filter failing is one that I've seen a lot, and what happens is the fuel pressure regulator inside of it fails, and it either just pumps more fuel than it should, or actually what it does is it doesn't return the fuel properly, or it creates a blockage and you get low fuel pressure. So if you have, or they have, I should say, a low fuel pressure gauge, they should be checking that as part of the diagnosis, not just shaking the dice and throwing them and wanting to put a camshaft on it. Even the GTI that I have outside, the cam was worn a bit, and there was no fault related to this. It was the thrust sensor fault that I was getting on mine. And I've seen a lot of high pressure pumps replaced or worn camshafts replaced, and really the problem wasn't the cam so much is that the follower was worn through, so the pintle of the high pressure pump wasn't getting pushed all the way enough, creating that high pressure. So those things are actually checkable, not just guessable. But man, I would first, like, my gut says this is a workmanship thing, and I'm not trying to blame the shop for it really, because, you know, what do I know? I'm not looking at the car. But to me, it was fine before, it's not after, in a system that's very close to where someone was working. Double check that stuff first, and then move on to the extra things, fuel filter, thrust sensor failure, all that kind of stuff, because something could have easily not been plugged in all the way, and all you have to do is go boop and plug it in, and your car could be fine. All right, next up is from Fred. I have an '07 Passat 2-liter turbo engine, have oil dripping somewhere on my driveway. The mechanic said it was the PCV valve. It was changed, but I still have the leak. Of course you do. It has 197,000 kilometers on it. Thinking it's a valve cover gasket. Any help would be appreciated. Is it a common leak on the valve cover? Thanks, Fred. Fred, very rarely does replacing the PCV valve actually fix the leak. Usually a bad PCV valve can cause the leak, but it won't fix itself because the gasket is already blown out or sucked in, and the only way to actually fix that is by replacing the gasket. So valve cover gaskets are pretty common on this generation car. In fact, I put one on the Mark 6, or sorry, the Mark 5, the Mark 5 out in the driveway because it was leaking. Actually, I replaced the entire valve cover because it had a couple of other issues. Valve cover's common, but man, the most common, hands down, not even close, oil leak on this generation car, the BPY engine, is oil change related leaks, meaning the drain plug not properly torqued, or crush washer not replaced, or wrong drain plug. I've seen that a lot too, or damaged threads in the pan. All that, which kind of goes back to not torquing properly. So those things are common from the drain plug. You also have at the bottom front of the engine, or front of the vehicle, I should say, the oil filter. Another really common failing component. It's plastic on plastic, dirt gets in the threads, the seal doesn't get replaced properly, the wrong filter gets installed, it doesn't get tightened down properly. All of these things can lead to oil leaks. It is really common. So what you need to do is you need to find out where this is actually coming from. What you can do is you can take some cardboard and slide it underneath your car and let the oil drip onto the cardboard. Then what you can do before you move the car or anything, try and get underneath it and shine your happy flashlight up there and look at the cardboard, see where there's oil stains, look above that, and then start to trace the oil. You can also add something like a UV dye that with a black light or an ultraviolet light will help you identify the path the oil is taking. That's another option as well. But the most common oil change related: drain plug and oil filter housing, the bottom end, the spring, the little ball that you got to push in. Sorry, the little nipple you got to push in to open the filter up to drain it. The actual filter housing itself that's bolted to the block. All common stuff. Valve cover gaskets were really common. Vacuum pump seals, timing cover seals are probably the biggest ones. This one didn't have the rear main seal issue or the front crank seal issue that, or timing cover issue it would be on the other one. And it didn't have any of those kind of issues. It was a little bit more common VW oil leaks than that stuff. So start with figuring out exactly where the oil is coming from. And you already got a new PCV, which is awesome, so you won't have to do that with the oil leaks. Remember that oil always leaks down. Start at the top and work your way down, tracing the path of oil. There can be oil that got blown around, maybe the cooling fans or just pure airflow through the engine, but oil will follow gravity and will always leak down. So use that as your trace for finding that leak. But start with the oil pan, start with the drain plug, start with the oil filter housing, and then go up top to valve cover, vacuum pump. And you'll probably find your leak is one of those things because those are for real the most common. All right, last one up is from Javier. Should I upgrade my stock VW Polo or just buy another car? I would like to build my car from the ground up. I currently have a 15 Polo with a 1.6 gas engine. Clearly, this is not a US car. The thing is, since the car is made in India, this model is mostly sold in third world countries, and I can't find much information or performance parts. There are many performance parts for Polo models like the 1.4 FSI and the GTI. I want to install a turbo, but can't find any kits. What do you suggest? Should I just buy parts made for other size engines and hope they fit? Don't hope they fit, Javier. We're going to make sure that they fit. So my gut says, and right, this is coming from me, is hell yeah, modify the car you have. It's cool because it's a car that not a lot of people modify. It's neat because it's going to be work. You can't just go boop, boop, beep, boop, click, click, buy, send into your house as a turbo kit like I did, which I think is not for everyone. I think for the savvy people, that buying part by part is a way better job. You can get better components and usually save a bunch of money. So my initial gut anyway was like, hell yeah, modify yours. Then I got to thinking a little more about it, and let's look at it a different way. Let's say it costs $5,000 to turbo that car. What else are we going to have to do? Well, we don't want to have our daily driver down for a couple days, weeks, right? So we're renting a car, maybe buying a beater car. That's going to add expense. And then we're going to have a modified car as our daily driver, which is fine. But remember that anytime you start modifying things, other systems suffer. You start to really find the weak points of the car. That could be, it rattles more. It could be sometimes when it's cold, it doesn't want to start. It could be either way. So what I would do looking at this is I would probably keep my VW Polo as my daily driver, leave it stock, and then I would get another car. I would get a second car to be my project car. So you could get something a little older that's already turboed and start upgrading. You could get something newer that's turboed and leave it be. You could sell the Polo and get something newer that's a little bit more in line with what you want. The cool thing about this is there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you want. If you want to modify that Polo, do it. Just remember that you're going to not be able to click and buy every part you want. Some parts you may have to buy for other cars and modify them or have them modified in order to make them work on your vehicle. The great thing about most of the VW 4-cylinders is things tend to be very similar and tend to share like bolt holes and port sizes sometimes. So you can a lot of times take these 4-cylinder components and really swap them around. You may have to trim or fine tune or file down some of these components to fit maybe a bracket that's in the way or something like that. But one, that's a fun part of modifying cars. You know, yes, installing a turbocharger is great. When you open the box up and go, here's my turbo and here's my parts, that's cool. One, there's still way more to that than just that, at least in my experience. And two, I think a little bit you rob yourself of a cool feeling of sourcing and modifying parts because they didn't make what they had, you know, what you needed for your car, and really making this more of a custom car, a custom build, than buy a bunch of parts, bolt them on, and you're good. I'm not talking any garbage about that though, because that's what I did on most of my cars. There's a couple of custom pieces on the Mark III, but for the most part, guys, it was click, order, buy, deliver. It came with another set of challenges, but that's essentially what I did. But you'll notice the Mark III has never been my daily driver. It's never been my main car. We've always had a backup car because, like it's been right now down for months doing transmission work, you're always going to run into issues with project cars that you don't expect, and it can go sideways very, very quickly, leaving you stranded, leaving you renting a car, leaving you taking Uber, all kinds of stuff. So I like the idea of modifying the 1.6 a lot. If you do that, pick up a junk beater car to drive around back and forth so you don't have to make bad choices with your project. You can really take your time and do it the way you exactly want it. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. Questions, comments, you guys know where they go. If you like the video, hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe right here on YouTube. Hey, ding that notification bell or sign up for email alerts. I feel like email alerts are the only way you're definitely getting notified that I just put out a video. I tested them all, and email is the only consistent one. If you want discounts to all those places that I mentioned and more, check out the Crew Membership Program. Also have a Patreon that if you guys are interested in, you can hit that. Some cool stuff going on over there. And of course, using any of my Amazon or other affiliate links does add a little bit and literally helps me keep the lights on. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Have an awesome week, and I will talk to you again next time.